Hello, friends. I am Chevy. Welcome to my shed. How are you today? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? I hope it's fantastic. Everything here is great. No Kindle today because I have not magically read a book in the last few days. Actually, that's technically not true. I have, but I'm not going to review it as a thing. So I started Holly, the final book in the most recent book. We don't know if it's final, but the most recent book about the character Holly Gibney that was through the Bill Hodges and Outsiders, and now this book. I started it this week. I'm about a quarter of the way through it, but I made it to like the first few chapters. They kept referencing this other case that I wasn't familiar with. And so I went and looked and discovered that there was a novella. There was a novella included as a collection in the collection If It Bleeds. And the novella's name is If It Bleeds. And it was a standalone little story about kind of a follow up to The Outsiders. Holly ends up learning about a creature that's similar to the creature in The Outsiders, and she has to deal with it. And so I did read that. So I paused reading Holly. I read that story in like a day. It's like I think it was a little over 30,000 words, maybe 40,000 words, which is a third of a normal Stephen King book. So that felt good. It was a good book, or it was a good read. It was a little bit hokey and a little bit hand wavy, but okay, you like whatever. The nice thing about it though, I read it. I'm not going to review it because it's part of a collection, and I haven't read the rest of the book. Even though the rest of the book is like, I think that one novella is three-quarters of the book. I think it's like my Kindle says I'm at 76% read or something like that. I don't know if that's because of where I'm at. Probably. So it's probably not. That's probably not true. It's probably about half. So I will probably someday go read the other stories. But when I read short fiction, I like to read unknown authors short fiction, or like Joe Hill. Joe Hill was absolutely hands down my favorite short fiction writer. So anyway, back to what I was saying. So I'm not going to review it as a book because it isn't. I haven't read the whole thing. That's fine. I'll do that someday if I ever go back and read that whole collection. But as an exercise in working towards my book, I have come to. My book is going to be a novella. My book is going to be between 30 and 50,000 words. It's not going to be a big book. It's going to be a small story. That's not to say that the story is small. That just the words, the amount of words. So reading this little novella from Stephen King was a big help because I've told you before I write a lot like him, and I always have. I have since I was a kid. My writing is I use run-on sentences a lot intentionally. I use a whole lot of asides intentionally, like stuff stuck inside of em dashes. I use a lot of parentheticals. So my reading is a very conversational style, very much like if I just sat down and told you the story, that's how it's going to read, and that's the way that he writes. And so seeing him put a little bit of restraint on that. So the story that's in If It Bleeds is the same size, like as far as what has to happen in order to deal with this creature. It's the same size story as the others, right? As The Outsider, as the stuff that happened in the Bill Hodges trilogy. It's the same size story. It's the same. It's not. It's a normal sized story for Stephen King, meaning that the protagonist, the antagonist, what has to happen for the antagonist's downfall. That it's a normal amount of stuff, but it's just less words. It's less of the asides. It's more focused, and it was really good to see how he handles that. So in just like with most of his books, in the beginning there was this is turning out to be a review, isn't it? In the beginning there was a lot of detail, a lot of asides. There was some ancillary little side mission, side stories, I guess, before getting to the conclusion. And at some point, the gear shift hits fifth gear, and now we just go short snippets of information until the end. And so it was good to see that, because that's kind of what I'm working towards. My story is a big enough story that I could write a full-size, Stephen King-sized book. It is a story of a guy going to his hometown, of finding out that there's something nefarious happening there, and him becoming the one that needs to solve that problem. But what I have chosen to do, and the way that you can, that is the story that almost all of his works are. What you do is just figure out how many problems do you want the character to need to solve before getting to that. Because that's where you build that on that character. That's where you build compassion for the character, you build, or maybe disdain for the character. That's where you build the book. You fill out that middle section, and that's where all of those little things that pull at your heartstrings when the character succeeds or fails, that's where that stuff is done. And so you might have... so in a novella, and like in my novella, there's going to be basically one problem that he has to solve before the confrontation, right? So the second act will consist of a single problem, a single thing. And once he overcomes that, now we can move on to overcoming the final thing. And if you want the book to be longer, you can just add more problems. You can just add more stops along the way. You can add more storylines. My book does have an A and a B story. I think that's kind of important these days. I think that most people are expecting that, and you don't even know it. When you watch a television show, for instance, even something like, say, Law and Order, there is a B story, and you might not even be aware of it. But those characters that you're watching week after week, they do have something going on in their lives. And every now and then you pick up a little detail. Every now and then that story progresses slightly further. And that makes them feel real, makes them feel alive, instead of just these robotic cops that go solve a new case each week. So my story does have a B story. And in my story, the B story is where the real character growth happens. It's where he really goes, and maybe there's a sigh of relief or an overcoming of a fear or whatever that might be. That is that story and my main story need to cross at some point, and they need to overlap. I need him to have to do something here in order to finish doing something here. So I will have that, but I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time pushing on that. And so I got to see Stephen King, or the If It Bleeds, had that same thing. So Holly was going through some personal stuff at the same time as she was going through this outsider stuff. And they intersect, and that's good. That it was good to see how he worked that in, because I want to do essentially that same thing. All stories are the same. It's just how you write them is different. I need to basically not necessarily use his story as a roadmap. I did not study it that way. I might go back and study it and plot out, like, all right, at this point we've hit this, at this point we've hit this, and that would give a generally loose novella structure. But I think I have a horror beat structure in my head that I think it's 15 beats, which basically comes down to like 15 chapters in a book, in my opinion. It doesn't quite work that way, but it's close. And that means that I could step through these 15 beats and go, all right, I did this, now I just need to move on to this, now I just need to move on to this, and then here we are. So it was good to read it as a study. It was whatever. It wasn't great. It was good. But now I'm enjoying Holly so far. So we'll see where that goes, and I'll probably review it next week. I figure I'll finish reading it this weekend. And then I might take a reading break for a little while. I've read a lot this last month, so we'll see. But other than that, my kid's here. It's her birthday next week, and she'll be at her mom's house, so we're going to do probably a little birthday celebration kind of thing here, just us, this weekend, and do some shopping and hanging out. And then I'm definitely going to come down and try to knock out getting the box put together and ready to go for my friend. So that's going to be a weekend project. What do you got going on this weekend? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends and wonderful people. I really appreciate you. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Today's word you should know sounds smart is totem. It is a noun meaning anything that serves as a venerated symbol. Our various formal and informal gardens are totems to our emphasis on the importance of the natural world. Totem, T-O-T-E-M. I think that's the first time in this book that the little example was not some sort of like hoity-toity, better than thou thing.